Hello, and thank you for watching this short video tutorial on practice tips for your audition for Towson University's Department of Music. I'm Dr. Phillip Collister. I'm the chairperson and professor of voice at Towson, and we very much look forward to welcoming you to Towson and to hearing your audition video and meeting you in person during your interview with us. We know these are difficult times for everyone, and especially for you as you prepare for your university audition. So we're here to help you, and we hope that this short video will give you some useful insight onto how to practice and prepare effectively for your audition, either live or on a video as well. I'm joined today by a few of my outstanding faculty members who have some tips and ideas for you. And I'd like for each of them to introduce themselves now so that you know who they are and their particular area of teaching at Towson. Linda?
Hi, I'm Professor Linda Dembowski, and I teach clarinet at Towson.
Hi, my name is Lori Hultgren, and I'm a professor in the voice department at Towson.
Hi, my name is Christopher Dillon, and I'm a pianist, and I teach ear training and theory at Towson University.
Hi, my name is Jason Rigby. I teach saxophone and jazz studies.
Hi, my name is Jeffrey Howard. I'm Associate Professor of Violin at Towson University.
So thank you all for joining me today for this conversation. Professor Dembowski, I'd like to jump right in with you and my first question. What are some strategies for an effective warm-up on a student's audition day and for helping them make their audition video?
Thank you, Dr. Collister. So first of all, have a game plan. Have a set warm-up before you, as you are preparing for this audition, things that are going to cover your fundamentals. First of all, breathing for all musicians is very important. So we need to take that time to breathe and relax for a few minutes before we start our warm-up. And again, having that warm-up set ahead of time. We're going to cover things like fundamentals, like long tones and rudiments for percussion, and think slowly. We want to warm up thoughtfully and slowly so that we're taking care of the air, the fingers, and the tongue, and our stick techniques or our bowing techniques. I also like to take those difficult spots in the music, that pick 2 or 3, and I'd like to actually make a warm-up out of them and play them slowly so that I can continue to commit them to memory and be more confident about it. And then finally, at the end of my warming up, I want to do just enough because I want to feel fresh before that recording or to be doing it live Zoom. However, I don't want to do too much. I want to do just enough, right? And then the last thing I want to do is I want to go back to that mental thing. Breathe a little bit more. That's why I love doing things like putting a little sign on my stand that say, you're going to crush it, so that we put ourselves in that positive mode. When you're making your recording, give yourself plenty of time. Give your time to relax, be comfortable with your technology, whatever it is that you're doing, and breathe and just be very positive when you do it. So that's what I have for you.
Thank you so much, Linda. Dr. Dillon, would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, well, Professor Dembowski, I really appreciated a couple of things you said. I heard think slowly and thoughtfully, and I also heard the word confidence, and I think those are really valuable points of view for the student. I'd like to add, as part of the warm-up process, I find it's important to warm up my heart. And what I mean by that is just to, well, professors are people too. And much as we may not seem like it to our students. But when we have to do an audition, if we can warm up to the faculty that we're playing for, I think that's another useful stance and position to put ourselves in.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much. Professor Hultgren, as a fellow voice person, I've always had a question I've wanted to ask you specifically around preparing for an audition. And my question is this: how do we eat an elephant?
So I've worked really hard at figuring out how to dissolve this elephant aspect with my students as well as with my own music making. So I think when we're faced with a really important audition, something that we really want, something that we're aiming for, learning a piece in itself becomes an overwhelming task because it has so much more weight and importance to us, and we can get overwhelmed very quickly. So I think the trick to preparing your music for these auditions or for performing in any venue is to take it apart as much as possible. And I divide it up into 8 different steps, and it's a layered approach. So the first step that I approach my music making is to learn just the pitch. Just the pitch. Take the piece, put it on a stand in front of you, play it with your instrument, or sing the pitches with your voice, while you are also reinforcing that pitch memory by playing it on the keyboard while you are singing those notes. No rhythm, no text. If you're an instrumentalist, same thing, just doing it out of rhythm. The second step after pitch is I want to focus on my breath, because as Professor Dembowski has already said, breathing is so important no matter what your instrument is. So I want to look through those phrases, decide where I want my inhalation points to be, how long I'm going to need to sustain that breath, and when I'm going to breathe again. So the second layer is I go back and I do that same thing, performing those pitches out of rhythmic context, just focusing on pitch, breath, and reinforcement with my hands. Third, now I want to start introducing rhythm. So I go back, I take away pitch, I take away my hand on the piano or on my instrument, and I want to clap. I want to speak, sing. I want to speak the rhythm, tap the rhythm, go through all those breath phrases from inhalation to exhalation, and decide what those rhythms are and reinforce that memory by clapping, tapping, saying the rhythmic values. Fourth step is I go back and I finally try to bring all 4 of those aspects together: pitch, rhythm, breath, and bringing it together at a much slower tempo than I might be performing out in the real world for my audience. Now, here's where singers have to diverge from instrumentalists, is we have 4 more steps. In addition to those first 4, we have to introduce text. So singers frequently want to skip this step and go straight to performing. I know the notes, I know the rhythms, let's go. And then they think, it's so hard to memorize this piece. How do I get this memorized? And we still have 4 more steps to go. So the first step, again, number 5, is going back to the beginning of the piece and speaking each single word by itself. Taste the word, savor the word, shape the word. If it is in a foreign language that you don't normally speak, check the International Phonetic Alphabet transcriptions of those pieces, or discuss it with your voice teachers so that they can help you with those pronunciations. Then once I flavor and taste each single one of those words, go back to the beginning, and I have to find where I inhale and where I finish that exhalation within the phrase, and speak those words now consecutively with elisions, connecting them together, connecting those dots over and over again, phrase by phrase for the piece. So that's step number 6. Number 7, I'm going to come back and I'm going to try to speak those phrases now with the correct rhythm added onto it. So now, instead of speaking it out of rhythm, phrase by phrase, I add that rhythmic value behind the text and get really comfortable with it. I'm building layer upon layer upon layer. Finally, I'm at layer 8, where I'm going to take all of those ingredients together and try to perform the piece slowly, out of rhythm a bit, phrase by phrase, with my text, with my pitch, with my rhythm, with my connection of the words, and savoring all of that. And then slowly turning up the speed knob so that I am more and more secure in the performance of that piece. This will alleviate so much stress later on in the game. It'll alleviate you making mistakes with your memorization and pitches and rhythms. It'll eliminate you having to coordinate with an accompanist and panicking because you aren't having the same phrasing or the same breathing. It'll also alleviate you running out of breath. If you practice where you're going to inhale over and over repeatedly, that muscle memory will follow you even to an audition setting. And then finally, it'll really alleviate a lot of your anxiety because you have layered this so many times upon one another that you are so sure in your music making that you can do the really magical thing, which is performing a piece of art for us. And then you could be creative in your audition.
That's great, Lori. Boy, I sure wish that I'd had those tips when I was auditioning for my college audition many, many years ago. Jason, I saw your hand raised. Would you like to comment on that?
Professor Hultgren, I love what you said. Two main things that you said that really struck me was, I love how you take apart the process of preparing for a piece, when a lot of people hear music, they don't realize all the effort that goes into it.
Yeah.
And your cutting it apart like that makes it very accessible for students and all musicians. And the second thing that I think is really important is the concept of going slow. It's so important to just really take your time with it, to let that every aspect of what you're talking about become absorbed into your psyche. So thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's great. So I know that many people may not have currently ready access to instruments, or you may need to have practice time when you can't make music at your house, make music out loud. So Professor Dillon, I'm wondering if you have some tips for how students can mentally practice for performance success.
Well, yes, I'm glad you asked, Dr. Collister. I'm found this a very helpful technique when I was working to memorize the 24 Preludes and Fugues of the Book 2 of the Well-Tempered Clavier. But it's not just a memory technique, really. As musicians, I think at some point we realize that the music that we're working on becomes the soundtrack of our lives, and that we hear this music all the time throughout our day. But sometimes when we become conscious of it, we also realize that it sometimes gets trapped in an endless loop. And just a small portion of our piece will play back again and again in our minds, and we wonder, how do we escape from that? So at first, we realize that that means that there is a fault in our memory, that we don't know what is next consciously enough to be able to continue the playback. So that's when we go back to the score and we find out what that is and really learn that place. So if you're up at night playing back your piece in your head and you cannot continue, then you basically just flag those places and then go back. And then you have the confidence that when you have that solved, that portion is fully memorized. But this is not just for folks who have to memorize their music for performances. This is really about having mental control about every aspect of the music. So another thing that we realize when we become conscious of these earworms is that we can actually tinker with them. So we can change a place where we might want to take time, or a place where we might want to begin a crescendo or decrescendo, so that we can look at the score and then we can play back in our heads and basically visualize how we want the music to sound, and we become creative in a way that's independent of the limitations of our technique, and we learn how then later to make our technique serve that idea that we have in our minds.
That's great. Wow, I think I may know now why I have insomnia. I'm wondering if anybody would like to comment on Dr. Dillon's. Yeah, go ahead, Lori.
Definitely, Dr. Dillon. I love this idea of the earworm, and this frequently plagues young musicians and old musicians alike, where we're dreaming, we're absent-mindedly doing things, and we get to this part where our mind is kind of mentally practicing and we don't even realize it, and then we hit one of those roadblocks, right? And I think again, another reaction that most young musicians maybe have is panic when they hit that place in their mind and they think, oh my gosh, I don't know what's coming next. I love your idea of taking that as an opportunity to flag places within our practicing regimen, so that when we go back to that, we take it as an opportunity to, how can I fiddle with this more? How can I reinforce this place more? And it gives us like an opportunity, instead of panicking, to make a mental highlighter, a mental highlighter of that place in our pieces that are developing, that are ever evolving and will continue to evolve even after your audition. But it gives you that opportunity to make a choice. Am I going to panic about this, or I'm going to fear this, or am I going to use that as an opportunity to create something special and reinforce my musical knowledge? And I love that idea.
Great, thank you. So, Professor Rigby, you and I spoke about your topic. It seems really intriguing. Would you share with us some of your tips?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Collister. I would like to talk about a strategy of practice that I find really helpful. I call it isolation practice, and I use broken rhythms to develop really super precise technique. And I feel like this is a good point in this conversation to talk about this. So basically what I'm thinking about doing is dealing on a physiological level, training the quick twitch nerves in my physicality. So if I have a difficult section of a piece or even a technical thing I'm working on, I'll demonstrate on it with a chromatic scale. Basically, I zoom in on a few notes, and I slow it down super much. I like that phrase. It's good. And what I do is I'll play the first note long, and then when I'm ready, I'll move to the second note as quickly as I can into the third note. So right now I'll do it with just 3 notes so you can see. So it's really important to take your time and only move when you're ready. Then I reverse the rhythm so that the first note that was long is now short. And I found that using this technique over and over again allows me to get to the music, which is the whole point of it all, first. The music is the focus. The technique enables us to better emote. And so this is aimed at baking that physical technique into the passages we play so they become second nature. So there you go. Thank you.
That's really fascinating. I'm wondering, Dr. Howard, what do you have to say about that?
I love this idea. We have a lot of things in string playing which are meant to sort of mess with your coordination. And Ivan Galamian wrote this very interesting scale book and collective book where it's about, I'd say, like 30 pages long. And the first 15 pages are all rhythm patterns that are just mathematically set up. And the second half are all sets of bowing patterns. And what the students at the Juilliard School actually do is, because Dorothy DeLay was the one who sort of like put this on the map strongly, you would have students take a specific passage that they're having trouble with. They would choose one of the rhythm patterns from the beginning, one of the bowing patterns from the end, and put the two of them together to do their practice. Now, I have my own string students do sort of variations of this all the time. One of the things that I like to do is, instead of having regular scale passages back and forth in one set of bowing patterns, I have them do them in combinations that connect together. So instead of doing a 4 bowing pattern or a 6 bowing pattern or an 8 bowing pattern, if you take any 3 numbers that add up to 12, I normally use 2, 4, and 6 as a starting point, and you do those for bowing patterns on a scale, it totally messes with your coordination back and forth. And as we know, when you're getting ready to perform and you're trying to get music under control, getting the coordination to feel comfortable and easy and fluent is very, very difficult. You want it to sound like it didn't take you anything but a moment's notice to be able to get started. And I love how you're organizing that for students to be able to make that present and have the problems magically disappear so the audience just gets the pure form when they come to the performance.
That's great. So I think that, all of our faculty have talked about a lot of different techniques that are really useful. I know that many people, Dr. Howard, I'm going to continue with you for a second. Many people, myself included, when I get up to perform, I have nerves. And do you have any ideas for people who are auditioning or performing for us about how they can tame their nerves in preparation for an audition or interview?
Absolutely, and thank you for the question. First, I wanted to sort of mention what I hope all of you are doing right now, which is taking notes. As all of you are sitting here listening to us, I find it fascinating what we've mentioned so far. And I'm just going to do a brief overview for a second of the things that I was writing down as we went. So I wrote down purposeful warm-up, score study, memory, breathing, comfort, the number of steps of preparation, muscle memory, slow practice. I wrote in personally making a moment in the music, thinking all the way through and having the music sort of sit in your mind. Now, the final stages of all these things are, for me, the most fun, is how do you actually make it into a present and an important performance? Where does that come and how do you set that into the audition? Now, one of the primary ways I'd say to do that is to play this music often. Play it a lot, play it for your friends, play it for your family, play it for your dog, play it for your uncle, play it for your aunt. What you want to have happen is you want this to be something that is so clear and consistent in how you approach the performance that you don't have to think mechanics. You can really think about trying to make that special moment happen. You can pay attention to how the judges are interacting with you while you go along. You can not worry so much about your memorization techniques, but more in terms of, how you present something that's interesting to people. The way that you set your scales when you're audition, that's part of your warm-up activities that you should be doing every day. Your sight reading, I'd say you should be doing your sight reading all the time. A little bit, even 2 or 3 lines a day as you get ready. Some of my colleagues, for example, like to prepare for performances by having that performance feeling on a daily basis or weekly basis before the audition comes up. So if you're expecting a 10 o'clock in the morning audition, you should prepare yourself to be ready at 10 o'clock in the morning. You should be trying to find a day or two in there where you can get up at 7, have your breakfast. Imagine that you're driving 45 minutes to wherever. You start at 8:30, and like by 10, you're not going to have your whole warm-up ready. You'll have some of it, but your head has to be ready for that experience. And once you go through all these steps, you'll be much better prepared to be able to handle it.
That's great. Thank you, Jeff. Anybody like to comment on taming nerves? Well, I can say I really appreciate, Dr. Howard, your comments there. I know that I find that the more prepared I am for anything, the better off I will be in terms of my overall performance. And certainly the comments that you've made and others have really helped me actually to rethink my own practice time, and I hope for those of you watching it has as well. So I have one last thing, a little curveball to throw at each one of you. I'm just going to ask you if you could choose one word that would best describe preparing for an audition. So take a moment to think about that, and I'd encourage those of you who are watching to do the same thing. I don't have any fancy music to play in the background while we're waiting and thinking music. So Linda, what is one word that you would use to describe the best preparation for an audition?
Listen.
Great. How about for you, Lori?
I have one I kind of want to cheat with too, but I would say foundation. And if I could be allowed to, I would say fortress foundation.
Fortress foundation. That's cool.
Fortress foundation.
Chris, what's your word?
Consciousness.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Jason?
Emote.
Great. And Jeff, how about you?
I'd say enjoy. Judges can tell right away if you love the music. You should go in there and enjoy it.
Yeah. And mine is storytelling. So that's great. So I want to thank my colleagues for joining me today for this conversation. And we do look forward to meeting you via your video audition and also your scheduled audition day for an interview and/or your skills assessment with our faculty. In the meantime, I would invite you to watch another video tutorial that we've prepared on our website, which discusses tips for creating your audition video. This can be found on our website at www.towson.edu/music. There's a link on our homepage which will take you directly to information about how to apply to Towson University and our department, as well as audition information and the video that I just mentioned. You can always also contact my assistant, Miss Marianne Chris, as well. She can be reached at mchriss, that's MCRISS @towson.edu, or by phone at 410-704-2836. Once again, thank you all for joining me today, and thanks everyone for watching. We wish you all the best with your audition. Take care.